Welcome to Hustle and Heart podcast, fueled by Terra Alma, where we spotlight the visionaries, the chefs, designers, and developers reshaping our built environment to bring people together in meaningful ways. Today's guest is someone whose work makes cities not just smarter, but more soulful. Pavi Ravio is an award-winning urban designer, placemaker, and co-founder of both Ravio Bauman and Parkly. Whether she's turning concrete corners into green oasis or championing community participation in urban design, Pavi is all about reimagining public spaces as places of joy, belonging, and possibility. Based in Helsinki and a leader in Placemaking Europe network, her impact is global, reminding us that small, modular changes can lead to massive cultural shifts. Let's dive into Pavi's planting seeds for a greener, happier cities, one pop-up, one parklet, one public moment at a time. Pavi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. Really lovely to be here.
Absolutely. So we got a couple of questions today. I'd love for you to describe for our listeners, as a city lover and a co-founder of both your companies, what moment or place first sparked your passion for designing more livable, greener cities?
That's a really good question. I think it's hard to pinpoint that one moment, but I have to say that definitely living in London in my kind of early adulthood probably played a huge kind of impact on that, how I became interested in public space and cities in general. This kind of massive city in its lovable, chaotic nature. How can it work? How can it bring people together? What do we need as people to thrive and to grow and to connect to each other and nature in our cities? That kind of mystery was evident for me. I also at the same time was studying already design and public art, so our kind of viewpoint to cities and public space was having that certain frame, of course. So these two things parallel probably kind of formed to what I am today. Yeah.
How long were you in London for?
I was there for 5 years, and it's already a while back ago, but I think I can still call that city at least partly my home city, even though I live in Helsinki.
Yeah, it was made such an impact on you, so of course you've got very fond memories of it.
Definitely.
As you took the knowledge from living in London, what were some of the challenges that were presented to you, or how were you able to overcome them, bringing that knowledge and that experience home to then work in Parkly or your other company, and how did you effectuate that?
Yeah, I could see that in London and in the UK back then there was already probably more progress in how we can integrate creative thinking and design thinking in terms of creating more sort of human-centric cities. When I moved back to Finland and in Helsinki, I did notice there's certain differences in the society and how we kind of expect the state to kind of deliver the best city for us instead of us being able to maybe formulate that ourselves. But over the past more than 10 years, I've noticed there's a huge difference between this then and now. There's a change in the planning culture, there's a change in the emphasis on participation. So it's been interesting to look at it from over the years, how it's been evolving to the direction where I always thought it should go. So, but yeah, I think every city is different, but in fact, and every public space is different, but there's always this certain same elements that wherever in the world I would, for instance, work in, there's these certain elements that I would always kind of lay the foundation on how to create better cities.
Now, obviously, you've traveled extensively. What are some other cities beyond London that have influenced how you work and how you shape spaces for the better?
Yes, definitely. I would say from Switzerland, a city called Bern. This is, of course, a city I've been visiting because my other half of Ravio Bauman is Swiss, and Daniel's home city. But I think Bern has a really lovely way of I read it as trust towards its citizens. It's evident in public space that people are sort of allowed and encouraged to take place, be active and sort of create it their own. The city has a policy or a practice that they have these kind of loose chairs everywhere in the city, and you can basically move them around in the parks, in the squares, and this is really a nice way of conveying this message that this is a city for people and you can use it the way you like. Of course, every city has its challenges in terms of making it livable, making it kind of thrive in different ways, but I think Bern has many of the elements that many cities would need. It's very green also, it's well connected to the river, to the kind of blue element. So yeah, that's one. And I recently have to pinpoint, well, Copenhagen I love, but I was just recently in Malmö in Sweden, just half an hour away from Copenhagen by train. But that struck me how well they've connected greenery to the new development, to the new areas also, and that's something that I found really inspiring.
Yes, I think we all could be better connected to nature and realizing how much that heals us, right? Whether it's in Japan and forest bathing or just being out and understanding that life continues, right? The river flows, the ocean waves are happening, so I think that's very important for all of us to have access to.
Exactly.
Yeah. So talk to me about working with public participation, because I think oftentimes it's good, but sometimes it's also challenging. So help me understand where maybe a community changed the trajectory or offered positive insights or perhaps negative insights that maybe changed the way that you were pursuing a project.
Yeah, I think participation, yes, like you said, it's challenging, but it's also kind of the best opportunity we have to create more connections between people and the place, people and the city. There are several examples where we could kind of gather information through that participation process from the citizens, which I think if we would have not done that kind of local information or information on the community would have gone kind of lost. This sort of information is key to designing human-centric cities and public spaces, and I think we haven't been very good at kind of gathering that and valuing that until now, maybe. But we've had several projects where the community has had an impact. For example, recently we worked with child-friendly cities here in Helsinki. There was a research or a survey carried out that found out that there's several unwelcoming public spaces in Eastern Helsinki for children, and this kind of, that was participatory process that impacted that the city wanted to move fast to some sort of implementation which would try to solve this issue, and so we started to work with these children's pop-up spaces, which have been very, very nice and I think impactful in these areas. So this was a nice example of information from the public, then turning it into an action quite in a fast pace. We've also had more challenging processes, of course, where I think the kind of meanwhile use or the placemaking phase hasn't really been understood as kind of as part of the process, as part of the project of or city planning project or process. So this is something we of course needed to address and put even more emphasis on communicating to the public and even accelerate our participation sort of methods to create this mutual understanding that placemaking is a interactive process to make that place better. Because when you do something in public space, you have to also sometimes deal with some previous disappointments or planning mistakes or overlooked participation results, and that's not always easy because it's not always about us and our project, but there has to be some channels, how to channel these voices and create this dialogue.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that, because it is a process, as you mentioned, and I think oftentimes people want quick wins and they don't often see that, you know, some really good things take a little bit longer, and I think people are anxious to see something happen soon. And I think you're able to effectuate that with the furniture that you make as well, because that's an immediate experience that people can enjoy. So talk to us about maybe fast tracking sustainable urban change through curated experiments. So walk us through maybe something recently that you've done that was able to allow people to see a quick win.
Yeah, I think many of our projects are about that quick win and kind of let's say taking the first steps and curate that or design that first step so that it's not like irrelevant of the future other steps. But yeah, I think recently we worked with a public square here in Helsinki where the kind of the city is planning it and redoing it eventually, but there's been kind of like a pause moment in this public space for probably more than a decade, and I think the citizens started to feel a bit frustrated. Of course, it's all grey, it's not inviting, it's very central to that district, so it's almost like a kind of highlighting that it's been a bit left on its own. In this case, we were able to tap into the wishes and needs of the citizens in the area. Mostly they want more green in the squares, more playfulness, more like neighborhood feel and more market life. And we implemented this process and the quick wins of placing more greenery there with our furniture, more places to sit down, more opportunities for play and all that. And once we started to do this, we could see that, yeah, it's kind of almost waiting to happen. But I think what also happened is that the city planners understood how much we can kind of have input for the actual city planning. So they used that information and the feedback and the reactions also when planning the new square, and these two things are linked. So the quick wins and the fast actions, and then the future new square, which will be renovated actually coming autumn. So that's nice to be able to bridge that two things together. But yeah, I think these visible changes are really important, especially in these very visible public spaces, because if they're left to wait, and yeah, we kind of lose this momentum and lose that opportunity for this positive cycle and positive dialogue about the future. And I really think it's true what someone wise said, that people can't reimagine the future if they don't see it. So it applies in many ways, that when we see it, we start to believe it's possible, and even small changes can have a huge impact.
Absolutely. There's a couple of projects that have taken place, you know, in the States that I'm aware of, and because people can see and touch and feel, a lot of other communities are saying, well, I want that. And that works where it is. And I don't think that they often understand that just because you can see, touch, and feel something somewhere doesn't mean that it's applicable to your community. You have to take into account what your community wants, the size, the access, the visibility, the parking, you know, intensity, if that's something to consider. So I think people, like you said, they don't know what they want until they've experienced something. And so that's why I'm a huge fan of travel, because obviously the more you travel, the more you see globally, the more you're able to pull those pieces back to where you are and hopefully effectuate change where you live.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's always there's these certain elements and inspiration you can draw in, but then how to apply to that place and that community and those stakeholders that have connection to that place. That's what it makes it really interesting, that you can't really copy that place spirit to another place, but you can maybe copy some of the methods and elements, and kind of, I think there's certain universal topics and themes that constantly pop up, and I think greenery is one of them. Also child-friendly public spaces or cities and so on, but how to apply it and how to recognize those kind of dynamics that are particular for one place. There you need to be very sensitive and have your eyes and ears open, and I think also the design thinking and kind of how you connect things together is always super inspiring and interesting.
Completely agree. Well, I appreciate you sharing about, child friendly. We're having, I think, a little bit of push in the US because we've got a significant amount of baby boomers, folks who were born, post World War II, and now they're aging. And what I'm seeing is a lot of developments that are being made for them where it's called age qualified. And so there might be an area that's 55 plus, but it is not child friendly. But they're building them in communities where it's right next to, a variety of ages and income levels, etc. Are you seeing anything in Europe for, 55 plus, or, areas that maybe are a little bit more targeted or redesigned where you're encouraging perhaps, adult gathering, but you're still not shut off from, the kids, right? Because there are times where I think it's very helpful to hear like the youth and the energy, but I also understand and respect that there are others who've said, hey, I've been through that part of my life. Yeah. I do want a little bit of peace and quiet here and there. So are you seeing any design specific where there's pockets for family play, but there's also pockets for perhaps some quiet spaces?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think this comes to the topic of mixed-use spaces, that I think they are the most beneficial for cities in general, that you can design spaces that are for all age groups, but that you should be sensitive to these different needs, of course, like how to combine playfulness to a more quiet space or more, let's say, serene. Yes. and so on. And I think that's it's an interesting design challenge, but I think that's also linked to that participation and creating these connections, and of course spatial design and landscaping. But I think it's totally possible to do this in kind of have many places in one bigger space. And I think that what makes it interesting, that you can find in a city, you could find spots and places that fit your current mood or your company, or whether you want to be alone and quiet, and you could kind of find those spots, and not with the idea of kind of shutting any group out from that space. So this is something that we address in our projects too. How do we combine these, and how do we create this welcoming feel for every group, every age group, every background, but still think of clever design decisions? How do we keep everyone happy in a way? I know it's sometimes it's not like the main purpose even. Sometimes it is about that space, the sort of analysis and the need and the connections maybe to another urban space point out to the fact that this is more of a, let's say, serene, nature-connected, quiet space. But when it's a larger public space, I think there should be room for everybody, and
of course
all noise levels and liveliness. So yeah, but I think it comes down to that cities as a network of public spaces, so that we would be able to connect these places more together and connect different space qualities also, and have this network that there is different sizes, different types, and then the larger ones would be this mixed use, lively, welcoming for everyone.
Yes, I love that. So you've been involved with Placemaking Europe for many years. What trends have you seen perhaps in the last couple of years that you think will continue, and maybe some new things to look forward to in the coming years?
Yeah, it's a really kind of broad topic and method, so that's why it's also super interesting. I think placemaking and placemakers have great ability to address many of the mega trends that cities have, and I think, let's say, reuse of urban space or let's say the post-industrial cities, let's say industrial buildings and the surroundings, that's currently in many cities a topic they need to address. I think more and more placemaking could be and is connected to also new development, so the understanding that investing in that participation and creating cities that, or new areas and district, new developments that are more connected to the social aspect of citizens and new habitants is kind of more more focus is put into that, rather than, let's say, people moving in and then the community is sort of expected to happen, which is probably not the case. I think there's many topics. I think winter placemaking is something we've been recently more and more talking about and organized a webinar, and that's a really interesting topic because us in the Nordics, we can talk about it with the Northern American and Canadians. We very much have things in common. But then when we go more, let's say, southern to Central Europe, it's maybe more about rain and darkness, not so much the cold. And when we go to southern Europe, Southern America, then we're not talking about, of course, winter placemaking anymore, but how do we cope with different weather conditions like extreme heat. So I think the interesting kind of fact about placemaking and Placemaking Europe, that network, is that there is so many things we can learn from each other, and so many kind of hot topics that we can address together. So yeah, there's more and more topics kind of coming to the table every year.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating because I think, it continues to remind us that the world turns and that the seasons change, and that it's important to recognize that there are certain activities and events that you do in certain times of the year in certain places that don't necessarily apply to other parts of the world. And for whatever reason, I decided to go to Arizona last summer, and I thought, I'm not sure that I understand what I was thinking. I went to Arizona in June and it is hot. But when the sun goes down, it's absolutely beautiful. So it's as though there's this whole other world that emerges, after the sun goes down. But there's also many parts of the world that there is a similar experience, because there's this whole nightlife. I had spent some time in Bangkok, and the world comes alive in the evening for these night markets, whether it's food or entertainment or shopping. And I just think it's fascinating that they're able to use 24 hours a day when, the majority of people are up in the morning, they do breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then they, retire for the evening. But there are many people who love just to be out at night. So I appreciate that there are cities who embrace that and create events to speak to them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this, like you said about the light, for instance, now in here in Finland, it's just super light, basically really late, and from early on we practically don't have so much darkness. So the contrasts are huge, and I think many placemakers or designers in the Nordics always heard this kind of, okay, this works in the summer, what about in the winter? And I think it's more and more kind of addressed that we need welcoming places and these social connections, specifically those in the wintertime too. And the funny thing is that in our project we've done with children and teenagers, for instance, they are using public furniture all year round, way more than adults actually in the winter. So
because they want to be out and be connected to one another? Is that the thought process?
Yeah, that too. And they are sort of not so sensitive to kind of, they at least here in Finland and I think in the Nordics, they're wearing kind of good winter gear always, and
Of course.
that makes them way more adaptable for different weather conditions. And yeah, so I think it's an interesting observation, because I think quite often we were also told like, okay, no one's going to use it in the winter, but this is a totally adult perspective. And yeah,
It's fascinating to see how the kids push us to think differently about things.
exactly. Yeah.
Yes. So at the heart of it all, what makes you feel most alive in your work? What keeps your hustle filled with heart?
Oh, it must be seeing people taking over a place we working in, kind of connecting together there. This is always super inspiring, because it always shows that it's about kind of enabling that to happen, and when you do that, it will happen. So our cities can be very lively, welcoming, adaptable, all these things, if we just have the tools for it, and of course the mindset. And Parkly is actually part of the Helsinki Summer Streets this year, or the next 2 summers. A big year.
Congratulations, yes.
It's a huge project for us, designed by landscape architects. So we just supply the furniture, but seeing that, I was there yesterday, and they just practically placed those modules there, seating, and the planting is yet to come, but there was already people sitting there the moment they placed it there, and I was like, this is it.
That feels good.
So this
Yes.
makes me very happy, and yeah, keep hustling.
Absolutely. No, that's great. It feels very good. I'm like you. If I bring people together and I introduce them to one another, I just like to sit back and watch the magic happen, because that gives me so much joy. I know that I'm paying it forward, and that new relationships will ripple from what I've pulled together. So thank you for creating these beautiful spaces.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me and sharing my story. Happy to do this.
Well, thank you for the beautiful reminder that placemaking is much more than a profession, it's a calling. Pavi's passion for human-centered design and community-led transformation inspires us to think differently about how we shape our streets, our cities, and our daily lives. If today's episode sparked an idea or made you see your city with new eyes, we'd love for you to share it. And if you know someone who's building connection through food, design, or gathering spaces, we want to meet them. This is Hustle and Heart, where we believe cities should feel like they were built for people, not just for passing through, but for truly belonging. Until next time, stay rooted, stay bold, and keep building with heart. Pavi, thank you so much for being here. If you wouldn't mind by blessing us with saying, hi, I'm Pavi Raivio, and you're listening to Hustle and Heart.
Sure. Hi, I'm Päivi Raivio, and you're listening to Hustle and Hearts.
I'm going to stop recording.